Hello everybody and welcome to Namaste from Canada. In today's video, we will cover a topic which is often asked about. Which city should you live in Canada, Toronto or Calgary? As a new immigrant to Canada, without any strong ties to a city, this can be a very important decision to make. If you have recently moved to Canada and not sure where to settle in, or if you are planning to come to Canada, you must watch this video and hopefully it will give you good insights about the differences between the two cities. In this video, I am going to cover the differences from several aspects, and I have divided the video into several chapters covering each aspect. We are going to look at the population and demographics, compare the weather of both the cities, the job opportunities and salaries and taxes in both cities, compare the cost of living in both cities. We will look at the recreational activities, the educational opportunities in both cities. We will also compare the crime rate and finally compare the local transportation of both the cities. If any of these chapters do not interest you, please feel free to skip and listen to the relevant chapter from the video's timeline. So firstly, population and demographics. The population of Toronto GTA is about 6.7 million people, whereas in Calgary it is 1.37 million. Now, when you look at the demographics, you will find that Toronto is way more multi-ethnic than Calgary, and that might be an attraction for many. The visible minority in Toronto is 51.50%, which includes 12.6% South Asians. Whereas in Calgary, the visible minorities are 38.6%, which includes 9.5% South Asians. Now let's talk about the weather. When you compare the temperatures between Calgary and Toronto, as you can see here, Calgary has a colder climate. This is especially felt in winter, as the onset of winter and snow is earlier in Calgary than in Toronto. So typically, Calgary gets about 6 centimeters of more snowfall than Toronto on an average and is 6 to 10 degrees Celsius colder than Toronto. Therefore, if you don't like snow and winters in general, you would prefer to be in Toronto. However, Calgary on the other hand is sunnier than Toronto. Calgary gets 333 days of sun annually, while Toronto gets about 300. That is almost a month more of sunny days a year. And believe me, having the sun outside plays a major factor in a northern country like Canada. Now, job opportunities, salaries and taxes. Now let's talk about job opportunities, salaries and taxes. Toronto is the biggest city in Canada and the financial capital of Canada. It is also the capital of the province of Ontario. Therefore, there are both public as well as private sector jobs in Toronto. The main sectors which hire in Toronto are financial services like banks and insurance, consulting, services like IT industries, whereas the main industries in Calgary would be oil and gas. It is the oil and gas capital of Canada. You have mining industries there, financial services, some IT industries and a few others. Here is a list of major industries in Calgary and Toronto. Also, you need to note that the GDP of Toronto is $421.7 billion, whereas the GDP of Calgary is $110 billion. Therefore, clearly, there are more job and economic opportunities available in Toronto over those in Calgary. Now let's take a look at the minimum wages. The minimum wages in both Alberta and Ontario is $15 an hour. However, the minimum wage in Alberta was instituted in 2018, whereas in Ontario, it came into effect on 1st of January 2022. Therefore, you can expect Alberta to be ahead of Ontario, meaning Calgary to be ahead of Toronto in terms of minimum wages in the future as well. In terms of taxes, it's a well-known fact that the overall taxes in Alberta is lower. For example, when you buy something in Toronto, you pay 13% HST, whereas in Calgary, you will be paying 5% of GST. So you pay less sales tax effectively for goods and services. Also, from an income tax point of view, Alberta has the highest personal exemption from income tax, which is at almost 18,000 Canadian dollars, whereas the same exemption in Ontario is at about 11,000 Canadian dollars. Additionally, the provincial income tax rates in Alberta makes it better for lower income and higher income people than in Ontario, while it's almost the same for middle income people. So from a perspective of jobs, Toronto will be ahead because it has a bigger GDP, it's a bigger economy, But in terms of salaries and taxes, Calgary would be a clear winner. Cost of living in both cities. Now let's take a look at the cost of living in both the cities. The cost of living in Calgary is significantly lower than in Toronto. One of the reasons is there is overall lower immigration in Calgary, and in Canada, immigrants ensure that certain costs like housing costs remain high. There are several independent estimates of cost of living comparison between the two cities. In one of them, the cost of living in Calgary was found to be 23% less than Toronto. So here is a visual showing you what is the cost of living comparison. One of the major causes of lower costs of living in Calgary is the housing cost. Getting a one-bedroom apartment in Toronto could cost you at least 2,100 Canadian dollars. A similar apartment in Calgary can cost 50 to 60% of what it costs in Toronto. Clearly, in addition to the housing costs, the food costs are also lower. So if you are a recent immigrant, you would probably not eat out much, and therefore your cost of living in Calgary will be much lower than what is shown in some of the estimates. Now let's take a look at the recreational activities. I personally think that both cities have good opportunities for recreational activities. There are several options for couples and young families in terms of recreation. Also, in terms of touristy activities, there are several places of interest or weekend getaways within a 2 to 3 hour drive from each city. It depends on what kind of recreational activities do you like more. For example, if you like to do more winter activities like skiing or snowboarding, then you may prefer Calgary. It is just an hour's drive away from the world famous ski slopes of Banff. On the other hand, if you prefer to visit vineyards and do wine tours, you may want to be in Toronto. Toronto is very close to the Niagara Falls and the Niagara region, which is famous as the wine growing region of Canada. Now, education. In this case, I think Toronto will win over Calgary hands down. The education facilities available in Toronto is one of the best. Toronto is home to some of the best universities not only in Canada but in the world. Besides the universities in Toronto, there are several well-known universities in nearby cities like Waterloo, Kingston, London, Guelph, Hamilton and Niagara regions. When you compare public schools between Calgary and Toronto, there are not many points of reference from where one can actually compare. I went to Cora to see what the different perspectives are in Cora, and what I found is that most people think that the public school and education system is quite comparable between the two cities. Now let's talk about crime rate. The crime index of Calgary is 35.76 and the safety scale is 64.24, while the crime index of Toronto is 41.32 and the safety scale is 58.68. This does mean that Calgary is relatively safer than Toronto. However, when you compare these crime indices with the major cities in the Indian subcontinent like Mumbai and Delhi in India, Karachi in Pakistan or Dhaka in Bangladesh, they are 59.58, 45.14, 53.61 and 64.10 respectively. So you can be assured that the crime rates are relatively lower in both these Canadian cities. Now let's take a look at local transportation. Finally, let's compare the local transportation of Calgary and Toronto. Toronto has a highly developed local transport system. However, it also takes a significant amount of time for people to commute, as most people live in the suburbs. On the other hand, the time taken by people to commute from suburbs to downtown Calgary is much lesser, making it a more attractive place. You can buy a monthly pass for Toronto Transit, which costs $143 per month, while the monthly pass for Calgary Transit will cost you about $112 per month. Therefore, the transit cost or the monthly transit pass costs less in Calgary. Now, we are not passing a judgment on which city is better, as the honest answer is it depends on your choices, your situation and preferences. Both cities are great to live in. However, you need to be aware of the differences between them, and that is what we wanted to share with you. If you have not subscribed to our channel yet, please do so and like this video and click the bell icon so that you keep getting notifications about similar content that we are posting on this channel. Thank you.